Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here tonight. It's wonderful to see such a good crowd. I want to welcome council and staff, but most importantly, all of you for being here tonight, those that I can see and those that are watching live stream at home. Just so you're not confused, before we start our council meeting this evening, we have some business to take care of from a closed session that we had tonight, and also one that we had August the 14th. I will admit I made a mistake when we had our session on August the 14th. We should have come back into council to rise and report, and we didn't do that. So tonight we're going to do the rise and report from both the closed session on the 14th of August and tonight. So can I have a recommendation to that end, please? Councillor Payne, Councillor Ices, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the one business item we dealt with was regarding the item that's on the screen in front of us, and the recommendation is that the confidential direction to staff regarding alternate financing opportunity be confirmed, and that is moved by Councillor Van Berkel, Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That's carried. Item 4.4, which was regarding negotiations regarding the mobility orbit. The direction, the confidential direction given to staff be confirmed, and that is moved by Councillor Ices and seconded by Councillor Fowler. All in favor? That's carried. Next was a position regarding a shared use facility partnership opportunity, moved by Councillor Ices, seconded by Deputy Mayor Davidson. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And finally, our item regarding appointing members to our Remembrance Day Working Committee. And I think it's very appropriate we're doing this tonight since we have so many members of the Legion here. So could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Van Berkel, Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That's carried. So that is now the confirming bylaw for the meeting, which is in front of us for both the 14th and the 11th. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Nicol, Councillor Payne. All those in favor? That's carried. An adjournment of our special council meeting. Councillor Deputy Mayor Davidson and Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That's carried. So thank you very much for that, and we'll move forward now with our council meeting. So I want to welcome you all to council tonight, and first, if I could, given the significance of the day, I would ask that we could all rise and have a moment's silence. 18 years ago today, we lost, there was about 3,000 people who were killed in the 9/11, so if we could just reflect on that. Thank you. So I will just take a few moments to give you a couple of housekeeping rules. So first of all, if you have an electronic device, if you would please either silence it or set it to vibrate. There are public facilities just out the door here to the left. If you want to follow along with what we're doing tonight, there is council agendas out on the table. There's white agendas. And also to let you know that we are audio and video recording this evening, and that we will retain the records in accordance with the town's retention bylaw. And if you do very curious and you want more information about what that bylaw is, you can get that information from the clerks. So now I would ask if there's any items on the open forum, and we have one. And the item, it's Lucy Gowers. And Lucy, thank you. Please come forward. And if you could please tell us what item it is on the agenda that you're speaking to, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
The foundations. So if I can just read a statement, that would be amazing, please, and thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, members of the audience. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of community foundations. Community foundations make significant contributions to our communities. They provide a framework for socially motivated activities, and they support social objectives. Community foundations build community relationships and long-lasting legacies. They add effectiveness to community activities, support community groups, and enhance the overall well-being of communities and individuals. Community foundations believe in a future that is bright and sustainable. It can be said that community foundations are vital to our quality of life, socially, culturally, and collectively. Youth Haven is no different. I am the executive director at Youth Haven, and I do believe in community foundations, and here's why. Our mission is to serve the needs of youths experiencing homelessness or at risk of becoming homeless by providing safe, supportive, healthy environment that encourages personal growth and positive change. Youth Haven offers 24-hour intake 7 days a week for approximately 20 youths at a time every day, aged 16 to 24. Youth Haven provides food, shelter, health care, programs, and care packages for approximately 400 youths every year. Youth Haven has expanded outreach services in Barrie, Orillia, Midland, and Collingwood, and South Simcoe, including Innisfil, Alliston, Angus, and Bradford. Our commitment is to support Simcoe County at-risk homeless youth with a safe and caring place to grow. We've experienced some tremendous change over the years, and we've seen growth in our programs and services while being challenged to maintain our resources and growing expectations. And because of it, Youth Haven relies on the support and generosity of our funders, our community, business partners, service clubs, organizations, friends, and of course, community foundations. We do incredible work, but unfortunately, in order for us to continue to do the work, we need to do the ask. Youth Haven operates within a budget. Our funding comes from a combination of sources: funds from the County of Simcoe, community-driven, private donations, community foundation grants, and through our own fundraising efforts. Like many organizations, we rely on these resources to ensure that we can continue to provide for those who depend on us. Fundraising, donations, and applying to grants are essential to us. They ensure we continue to operate our shelter and provide vital services to youths who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of becoming homeless. The youths that we serve deserve the best, and we're committed to giving them nothing less. Without the generosity and support of our funders, community and community foundations, Youth Haven couldn't be what it is today. With the added support from the Community Foundation, we'll be able to move more youth from homelessness into transitional homes or permanent housing by offering more life skills workshops and job readiness programs, provide more food, clothing, and assistance to at-risk youth, operate more efficiently and effectively because we'll have the staffing and the resources we so desperately need. So, when considering the possibility of executing a community foundation, please reflect on what they have to offer: a vision for creating a brighter future and stronger communities. We thank community foundations for sharing our vision to provide every possible opportunity for brighter futures for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gowers, sorry. That was the only item on the open forum for this evening, so now we'll ask for a recommendation for the approval of the agenda for September the 11th. And there was no agenda repair that I saw, so it was Councillor Fowler and Councillor Van Berkel. All those in favor? That's carried. Next, I would ask if there was any disclosures of interest from anybody. Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a conflict of interest in item 6.2 involving the Legion. I'm the immediate past president and still involved with the organization.
Thank you. And under the new rules of the, as of March 1st, under the new Municipal Act, they have to be submitted in writing. So if you have not, you have already? Great, wonderful. And Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a conflict on the consent list C4, Carson Creek. My wife works for the consultant.
Thank you. Duly noted on both matters. Thank you very much. So next is presentations and petitions. The first item on the agenda is a presentation to acknowledge the achievements of one of our local athletes. And I would ask that Ava Silva come forward. Hello, Ava. How are you?
Good.
Good. So Ava, why don't you tell everybody here and those that are watching from home a little bit about your summer?
Well, it was awesome, and
You got to go play baseball?
I got to go play baseball, yeah.
And how did you do?
Good.
You won, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how many other Canadian girls were with you in the United States?
1.
So
2.
Out of all Canadians. So, and how old are you, Ava?
8.
And what position do you play on your team?
Right.
Very good. We're so proud of you. We really are very proud of you that you were chosen. And I have a certificate that I'd like for all of council to present to you for your achievements because, you know, I'm telling you, these women from Canada, Bianca Andrescu and Ava Silva, are putting their mark on Canada and making us so proud. So all of us in Innisfil are so proud of your achievements, and we're just going to ask you if you'd like to come up here and we can present you with a plaque.
Go up.
I think that's quite appropriate. Oh, I guess we should go back. So I want to thank you very much, Ava, for coming out tonight and bringing all your fans and friends with you and your family. And I want to thank Councillor Fowler for bringing your accomplishments to our attention so that we could recognize you. And we have a recommendation that Council extends congratulations to Ava Silver for her extraordinary accomplishments and also playing for the Innisfil Cardinals. And that's moved by Councillor Fowler and seconded by Councillor Orsatti. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're going to move on with your agenda. You are more than welcome to stay because there's lots of exciting things, but please don't feel like you have to sit through the whole meeting if you don't. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, item 5.2, we have the Director of Transportation and Engineering, Christian Meal, and also Julie Scruton, Manager of Transportation Construction from the County of Simcoe, and they're going to talk to us, give us some insight about the reconstruction of Innisfil Beach Road and 20th Side Road. Whenever you're ready, Christian.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and good evening, members of council. It's certainly a tough act to follow, so do what I can to keep the excitement in the air. So it's a pleasure for Julia and I to be here tonight as representatives of the county and to provide some information on our capital construction program. I know we've been asked here today to specifically talk about Innisfil Beach Road and the 20th Side Road, but I'm certainly happy to entertain questions on any aspect of Innisfil Beach Road and the work that's underway, like right in front of your building here, and some of the additional projects we have planned here over the next few years, with permission, of course, time permitting. So I'll jump right in. I'll talk a little bit about the history and how we got to the point where we are at today. I'll do a quick description of the improvements that are included in the intersection project at the 20th Side Road. We'll show you some plan and profile drawings. We'll touch on the schedule and budget as well. I know I only have 5 minutes for presentation, so I'll be incredibly brief. But it's hard to believe we've been working on this project for a little over 10 years now. It was something that was included in our initial round of our transportation master plan. And we completed the environmental assessment at the intersection in 2008. The initial schedule included construction of this work in and around 2013 and 2014, so we're certainly a little delayed from there. As part of the environmental assessment, did provide the ability to acquire the necessary property, which was then done in 2010 for the residential and commercial properties. And then we brought a design up to 60% for 2013. At that point, we had some additional challenges to overcome. At the same time, I know the town was working on their portion of Innisfil Beach Road on the east side of the tracks, so we just had some additional back and forth to make sure we married up the two designs. Part of the biggest challenge with this intersection is the presence of the Metrolinx line. I hope I'm not alone here, and working with Metrolinx as an agency is incredibly difficult and frustrating. In their defense, in and around the same time, they had improvements to their network and the regional express rail plans that I'm sure you're familiar with. Part of that included a Metrolinx system-wide grade separation study. So effectively shelved our project because the concern was we didn't want to build our at-grade crossing only for Metrolinx to come by shortly after and separate the crossing. What I mean by that is they would separate the rail from the road, one or the other above, to eliminate that conflict between the trains and the vehicles. So we basically shelved the project until 2017 when they came back with the recommendation of that study that this crossing would remain at grade. So we brought that back out, some additional back and forth just to ensure we included the servicing for the water main. As part of the Metrolinx work, they did also include the potential for adding a second track just to accommodate some of that increased service. And that went back and forth quite a ways, and ultimately they decided not to include that second track. So that had an effect on our design, and certainly provided some opportunity for Innisfil staff to comment on that design as well. While all that was going on, we did prepare some site preparation, or complete some site preparation. In 2015, we had a tree clearing contract out on site to make room for some utility relocation, which is pretty much done for Bell, Hydro or InPower, and Enbridge Gas is all complete, so at least that component of the project is done. And just to give you an example of the type of delays that Metrolinx can cause, just a little information on the property acquisition that we had to go through with that agency. typically what would happen, or this type of process would be completed in 6 to 12 months, maybe 18 months for a real worst case scenario. And you can see with Metrolinx, it's something that took over 5 years. We were working on that from 2011 until 2016. Well, that brings us to today. So as far as the improvements that are included in the intersection works, so we are widening the road from 2 to 4 lanes just to add additional capacity similar to both east and west of the tracks. Part of that will also include a westbound left turn lane for traffic coming out of Alcona to be able to turn south and go on the 20th side road. Also include installation of permanent traffic signals as opposed to the temporary signals you see out there today, strung on wires, a more traditional configuration. Also connected to the crossing signals, the railway crossing. There will include a concrete raised median. One of the concerns from Metrolinx, extending that raised median across to the east to eliminate that eastbound north left turn on the northbound of 20th Side Road. Effectively what happens is some of that traffic queues across the crossing, which is they wanted to eliminate. And I'll show you that maybe on the drawing, it'll be a little more clear. Also, as part of that work, we're going to extend the concrete sidewalk that currently comes up to the east side with the addition of the multi-use trail or active transportation trail that will make that connection for pedestrian and other traffic all the way along the south side of Innisfil Beach Road, which provides a connection right here to the recreation facility. And then also some minor improvements to drainage, effectively upgrading the intersection from a rural cross-section, open ditches and granular shoulders to an urban cross-section. Excuse me. So just a couple of drawings here. I was hoping they would show a little more clear. Perhaps I can use a pointer here. So you can just see the north limit of the road on that side, south limit, the railway crossing here. Just showing, it's a pretty busy drawing, so a lot of underground that's included there. 2 westbound lanes, 2 eastbound lanes. You can kind of see the turning lane. And there's the center raised median that I was talking about to eliminate that turn for the traffic going up and then north on the 20th Side Road, as that has the potential to queue across the railway. And then on the bottom, it's just a profile view, just everything kind of drops towards the lake, just to show some of the additional underground servicing there that's included as part of the project. So maybe this drawing shows it a little better just in terms of how that intersection looks today and how it will look when we're complete with the work. The yellow line is the existing edge of pavement the way it sits today. The blue line is just some property line information. And then, of course, the, whoops, it's all right. The dark line, that'll be the future edge of pavement on the one side. And on the other side, the 20th Side Road would remain a 2-lane road with some shift a little bit to the west, just to provide a little better geometry there to improve the sightline at the intersection. But you can see some of the changes that will, or how the intersection will look once the work is complete. Okay, in terms of the schedule, part of the challenge working with Metrolinx, we do require agreements from them as we're effectively building infrastructure across their property. So we did submit the agreement for the utility crossing, and those approvals are pending. I think we just had some information on that the other day. And then we will also submit 100% drawings for the agreement to do the actual road work here in the fall. It is somewhat timely. Hopefully you've seen the notices by now. Metrolinx do have a rehab plan for that crossing, which will close the crossing and the roadway beginning next weekend. I believe the 20th is Friday. The schedule is to go from Friday to Monday. I think that should read the 23rd. So part of that work, working with the construction folks, actually is quite easy. They have included some of that work to do the crossing rehab to not just limit to the intersection or to the roadway that's there, but extend their work right to the future limits, which will effectively help us in the future minimize cost and minimize delay then when we come through next year to complete our work in the spring. In terms of the budget, the total county-approved budget is $6.5 million, and that includes everything right back to the beginning, including the environmental assessment, utility moves, property acquisition, and everything that's included. The actual road construction work itself is estimated a little over $3 million. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it. I'm close to the 5-minute limit. So
Very
happy to
good.
take any questions.
Very good. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be lots, but thank you very much for that. Councillor Asadi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. Just clarification on the medium that prevents the northbound turning left onto the 20th. So, and that is right behind the preventing traffic that's eastbound on Innisfil Beach Road from turning northbound on the 20th behind No Frills. How do they get home? Because we have a lot of people, commuter traffic, they're coming down Innisfil Beach Road, and I know it's a very dangerous intersection that we have to come up with, but are they going to have to go through that plaza? Because I can't figure out another way.
No, the expectation wouldn't be that they go through the plaza. I understand that's some of the concern there today, but I know there's another roadway a little bit to the east of there. I think, is it called Webster Road? I know that doesn't go anywhere today, but it is planned to do some connection in the future, and also further east there to the 25th Side Road. But we've had similar situations to this in other areas of the county, as you can imagine. And yes, it may be frustrating to begin with, but motorists will find another way around, whether they got to go somewhere a little bit further west and then north to the 9th, or I don't know where else they're going in that area. But it is a safety concern that we're aware of, and Metrolinx is aware of, and something that we need to address. So it is unfortunately a movement that we need to restrict.
Thank you very much. Just a follow-up. So and I was just trying to capture the dates on that, and I think residents in Innisfil and all of council agree that it's a very dangerous intersection. I mean, almost accidents all the time with people trying to, you know, head north on that or pull out and go. But I'm just wondering, and it'll probably be our engineering staff that might be able to answer that. I would think that it would have to, the medium and the preventing of the turn on that would have to coincide with the opening of Webster to get over to the 9th, because that's currently not ready. So we're forcing a lot of traffic through a plaza that has narrow entranceways and problems right now. So it is a concern. Is there a timing for that medium again?
So it will be included in the construction works that will be completed next year in 2020.
Next year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just trying to get a grasp of what those medians are doing with traffic flow, particularly as it relates to farm equipment. So am I understanding that if we're driving east on Innisfil Beach Road and we want to go north on the 20th Side Road, that barrier will impede that?
It will.
So
yes.
Our farm equipment, which is oversized to begin with, is now forced to go into an urban area with narrow streets to do what we need to do, farming the rural land north of Innisfil Beach Road?
Yeah, I certainly have respect for the farming community and the type of transportation and vehicles you're trying to move around.
You can't be kidding. You can't be kidding on that.
I'm not kidding.
That's not workable.
No, it may not be workable at that location, but certainly there's an alternative, whether you got to come west and go up Yonge Street and go across the 9th. I don't know exactly where you're coming from and going to, but there certainly are alternatives to that movement to still be able to get to where you need to go.
So if I'm coming from further south on the 20th Side Road, just all I want to do is get across Innisfil Beach Road and continue up the 20th. I have to go west on Innisfil Beach Road to Yonge Street, head north on Yonge Street to the 9th, head east on the 9th to get all the way back to the 20th because of 4 feet of concrete.
That's one alternative, yes, and recognizing it's out of the way. We can certainly consider options, but I hope you can recognize, and this is a concern that Metrolinx had as well, and one of the reasons why we did it. What happens is traffic turning left there, because it's an uncontrolled intersection, really queues back, and you could have a car sitting on the crossing when a train goes through. So that's a trade-off we have to make. We want to make that improvement, recognizing there's obviously a trade-off with perhaps making it a little more inconvenient for that movement to make for farm vehicles.
So these plans are not reviewable anymore?
That median issue is pretty much set, I will admit.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Feller.
When it comes down to it, I can understand the basis of the argument for the median, but what you're doing is taking a county road and putting all that traffic, which can flow freely and smoothly through, into a residential area, into a highly congested residential area. I think that's an accident waiting to happen. You need one kid to run out of the street. Kids don't run across 20th Side Road. They run across Webster. I live in the area where Webster now exists and goes between 7th and Innisfil Beach Road, and it's a speedway. There's more complaints and problems and issues with drivers on that road in that residential area than there is with any side road, because the children are not on the 20th. The children are on Webster. It's where my son gets picked up for the school. I've seen it firsthand. This just, as much as I can understand the cautionary desire you have, you're just pushing a problem to a different location where it's greater potential for accidents.
So, you know, we brought this here tonight because we all knew it was a very bad intersection. We all knew there was no magic bullet that was going to fix it. You know, I don't know a better way to do it, but CAO Rayner had his hand up.
Your Worship, members of council, it's just important, I think, while we're talking about this intersection, to understand that a realignment of 20 Side Road actually to avoid that specific intersection is part of our transportation master plan and part of our DC background study, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to put Ms. Jenkins on the spot. What I do recall, my limited recollection, is that it's an outrageously expensive realignment for a number of reasons. So it's not next year, but it is important. I think that particularly new council members are aware of that. If you'd like more information on it, I'm sure we could refresh your memory either by email or a memo. But I think it's important that you realize that this is not the final solution for this intersection, as far as I understand it. Thank you, Worship.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. Years ago when I was on council, there was a proposal to take the 20th and go west around by where we have our reservoir, to take the 20th up through there and across and over and come east of the church, the community center there was there. What's happened with that idea? Because we did see a draft of that.
Ms. Jenkins, do you happen to have the answer to the Deputy Mayor's question?
Through your worship, yes, that's the same bypass that Mr. Rayner is mentioning. It is in our transportation master plan and our DC background study. However, you know, one of the factors in the timing of that is the development in the area that will trigger the numbers needed to support that bypass. And as Mr. Rayner mentioned, it's a very expensive project. So it's something that when we're looking at the 10-year budget, we're trying to figure out exactly when the timing of that will be. So,
Can you follow up, Your Worship? Follow up. Okay, so at that time, being on council, I remember saying we should have been land banking and buying those properties at that time. I think Mr. Councillor Van Berkel was there at the time, where he suggested council should have been land banking back then and buying those properties at a heck of a lot less than we'd be buying now. So that just goes to show you that our foresight was somewhat naive, because now what it's going to cost, it seems to be, I bet you it's going to be in the tens of millions to purchase that property. So I think we should look forward in our master plan for the future that this doesn't happen again. That's all. Thank you.
So, Councillor, it's a struggle every year with budgets to put away what we can put away and to move our master transportation plan forward. In a perfect world, you're absolutely right. But as you know, there's always a struggle between fixing every road and also keeping budgets at a place where we can keep them. Councillor Assetti?
Thank you for allowing me the additional question. I don't want to downplay the importance of the County of Simcoe putting in this necessary new traffic flow to prevent the accidents that are happening at the 20th, because this design saves a life. Our problem here in Innisfil is that we don't have the other roads ready for the flow to align with this. And I just wonder with Ms. Jenkins, if I can ask, what is the timing for Webster to continue out? Could you give us an idea on that to know what we're looking at?
Through your worship, yeah, I just pulled up the Transportation Master Plan and took a look at both the 20th Side Road bypass and the Webster Boulevard extension. Both are listed as medium-term projects, which I believe the timing in here for medium-term is anywhere from 2022 to 2031. So that being said, we also have to look at the timing with respect to development charges, because sometimes that changes, and sometimes, even though it's recommended in the budget, in the master plan at a certain timing, when we go to look at planning for development, because that changes very quickly. Master plans are only updated every 5 years, so the timing of that could change. It just depends on a number of factors to do with development, so.
Thank you. Other, Councillor Waters?
Is there any opportunity to reapproach the rail line in terms of in terms of changing that to a raised intersection as opposed to what we have? Because this is a very busy road. And so I'm not too sure what their criteria are for choosing raised versus, a normal land-based intersection. Is there any opportunity to talk to Go again about that opportunity?
Yeah, through the chair, when you say raised, you mean separate the rail from the road?
That would be correct. Either have the road go underneath the rail or vice versa.
Okay. I know they did that study back in 2017, and we were fully expecting actually this would be one of those crossings that are identified for a grade separation just based on the number of, or the amount of traffic that's going across Innisfil Beach Road and the amount of train traffic that's going to be eventually on that line. If you look at the study, though, unfortunately, they did a system-wide analysis, and they really have a lot of other priorities on their entire network that would be much busier than this. And when they prioritize those road crossings and rank them, Innisfil Beach Road falls a little bit lower, and unfortunately, their recommendation is to then leave it as a grade crossing. Having said that, I don't think there's any restriction on going back and ask them if it's something that they can reconsider. I can tell you the chances are probably pretty minimal as it's something that they'll be able to accomplish here in the near term.
Thank you. I'm picturing in my mind Green Lane, which is a major east-west crossing in the north part of, I guess it's in East Gwillimbury, but it takes a lot of the east-west traffic from Newmarket, and it's probably as busy, if not busier, than Innisfil Beach Road, and it's an at-grade crossing. So the question I would have, do we have the separated grade crossing in our future DC study, in our DC study for the future? Ms. Jenkins?
Through your worship, yes, we do have that grade separation in our DC background study.
Other questions? Other questions on any of the other projects, the major project that is going on out here at Innisfil Beach and Yonge, or the widening of Innisfil Beach Road? I can tell you, I'm very excited that we were able to get the grant money for the multi-use trail on this section. And this is maybe not a fair question, but sometimes when you sit at Simcoe County and there's 16-member municipalities, and it seems like all of the money is being spent in other municipalities, like on, I know, County Road 90, County Road 50, in Adjtos, County Road 90 in Essa. Finally the time comes when Innisfil is getting kind of some of our money. But do you have off the top of your head the whole length of the project, say from the 400 to County Road 20, what the total investment in the community is?
I have that number. I brought Julie along for the difficult questions. I can get you that number. I don't have that off the top of my head, but it is a pretty significant investment when you include all the work, not only to the 400, but even west of there, right to 27 to Thornton.
Right.
Is included in the project. I can certainly provide that total dollar value.
It would be good for us to understand that. And also, you mentioned it, but I will mention again that, that Innisfil Beach Road will be closed at the railway crossing from 8 o'clock on Friday, September the 20th until 5 a.m. on Monday, the 23rd. So we're going to have to work with our folks in communications to get that message out and make sure that people are aware of it, because it will be, it will cause a bit of havoc down there, I would think. Any other questions? Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know if you maybe answer this or not. Obviously, some time ago, there was talk of Yonge Street from Bradford all the way up to Highway 89 going to 4 lanes with turning lanes too. I'm just wondering, is there a timeline for even just the intersection work to begin? I know that it seems like all the hydro lines have been moved back, but I'm just wondering if there's a timeline for that project to start as well.
Sure. Through the chair, County Road 4 is definitely moving forward. We're starting in the south end and Bradford moving north. So the property acquisition is underway there right now for utilities to start moving this year and next, and then construction in 2021. Right. So the first section, south side 2021, and then proceeding north from there up to the intersection at County Road 89. And then even further than that, from 89 north to the Barrie limit, that environmental assessment will begin next year. Yep, next year. Basically bringing that project up north of 89 all the way to the city of Barrie limit here over the next number of years.
And that did prompt one other question, I'm sorry, and this might actually help the concerns regarding the limiting of the eastbound north turn. I remember seeing in one of the budget documents signalization at County Road 4, Yonge Street, and the 9th line. And I'm thinking that was 2020. Do you recall that being in there? Because if there's signalization at Yonge Street and the 9th line, it will significantly help the problem here. So people, instead of they'd go up to the 9th and turn right as opposed to down Innisfil Beach Road.
Yes, I just confirmed. So there is intersection work planned at the 9th line. We're currently looking at a roundabout at that location in 2023.
Okay. All right.
It will still help with the traffic in the area. It'll be a huge improvement compared to what is there today. Recognize that.
And we'll have to make sure we consult with the agricultural community about making sure it's wide enough for large combines.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Inwood.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did just want to acknowledge and thank Christian, Julie, and the team from Simcoe County. They've been a huge asset in helping us achieve some of our goals, including multi-use trail connections from the existing in Alcona up to here. That work, it comes with a lot of benefit to our residents, and we thank them for doing that work. So I just wanted to acknowledge and thank them for that.
Appreciate those comments.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation that the presentation regarding Innisfil Beach Road and 20th Side Road intersection improvements be received as information. Could I have a mover? Councillor Waters and Councillor Payne. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to just ask if there's council concurrence. We have some gentlemen here that if it's possible to switch the order of the next two delegations and ask the Parkbridge people if they wouldn't mind waiting just a little bit longer so we could let our veterans go next, if that would be okay with council. Okay, so if we could then invite the Lefroy Legion, Mark Southcott and Roy Bridge to come forward to speak about development charges related to the expansion of the Lefroy Legion. Gentlemen.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, civic employees, and those here attending this meeting. I'd like to just take a second to thank our members for coming out tonight in support of our endeavors to appeal. My colleagues and I are here tonight to appeal to the Innisfil Town Council for an alternative to a $38,000 charge to cover development costs. I'd like to begin by saying that we recognize the value of development revenues for the continuing need of infrastructural enhancement to provide for a growing community. We see this as necessary and beneficial for the town of Innisfil now and in the future. Unfortunately, for a small Legion branch like ours, it taxes our finances to a critical degree in trying to expand the size of our dining hall to provide more rental revenue and host larger Legion events such as dinners and dances, as well as making our hall available free of charge to various charity groups in our community. We've had to incur a number of costs that have been necessary to obtain a building permit, as well as paying other charges to cover engineering, legal, and architectural requirements. These have amounted to date of over $50,000, which has largely depleted our general account to a point where we only have a few $1,000s left. These are monies that we use to purchase food and beverages for sale, maintenance supplies, and labor hired for cleaning and repair services to our building, such things as plumbing, electrical, and structural needs that are beyond the scope of our volunteers to undertake. We also have a very small building fund that we are trying to preserve as much as possible to provide for some of the extras that will be required when the basic building construction is completed. This would include things like building a bar with coolers, draft taps, lighting, and sound systems. This fund in the long run is to provide coverage for building maintenance needs, but this fund has also been largely depleted because of the previously mentioned costs associated with obtaining a building permit and designing the addition. This gives you a cursory idea of our current financial situation and shows the difficulty we would have in trying to accommodate a $38,000 development fee at a time of significant demands on our financial resources. As a community service organization, we try to provide money for community needs as well as caring for our veterans. Examples would be the $8,300 that we donated to the Innisfil Fire Department for defibrillators in recent years, and $15,000 that has been earmarked for the Rizzardo Health Center in 2020, if we can obtain permission from our provincial organization for that. These donations come from our Poppy Fund that carries strict guidelines on how we can spend the money. It has to be directly for the benefit of veterans. We have also made many smaller donations, and an example would be the recent $500 donation to Innisfil Minor Hockey. We are the only Royal Canadian Legion branch in Innisfil and feel that our presence enhances our local community, and that as a not-for-profit community service organization, our very survival depends on the enlargement of our present facilities. We have approached some developers who have shown an interest in making a commitment to help us, but we cannot proceed to this stage without a building permit issued by the town of Innisfil. We therefore ask the council for any assistance that you are able to provide and would be very grateful for your help in this matter. Thank you very much for your time in considering our appeal this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Southcott. Questions or comments? Councillor Asadi?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I just want to thank all the veterans for all that you do in Innisfil. And I know that many of the Legions we've all heard about are struggling to survive, and some, with the likelihood of closing. I believe in Midland they had to do an emergency fundraising by the community just to keep the building going. So we applaud your efforts. And the expansion of, from what I understand, the expansion of your facility allows a level on the ground level, so it allows accessibility, and it also...
That's very true, and it will allow some of our veterans of senior years better and easier access to our building. They now have to climb a flight of stairs, and we tried to get a stair lift put in to do that, but unfortunately, due to fire regulations, it was going to prevent access to the building too close to the door, so we were turned down on that one. But the new expansion and the new ramps we're putting in will make it a lot easier for our senior veterans to be able to enter the building.
Yeah, and the Accessibility Act makes it, I mean, it's important, it's necessary, but it also adds greater cost to everything. So also I understand that the expansion of this to the Legion also allows the increasing of events and your rental that helps subsidize the Legion for your operating costs, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. I have a recommendation that, I don't know if there's other conversation here first from council. I'll ask that, and then I have a recommendation that I'd like to make to council. So should I? Okay.
Deputy Mayor Davidson, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor. That's okay?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I do want to hear Donna's, Councillor Sadi, recommendation, and I just want to question if, once I hear it, I have a question I'm going to send to Lockie Davis, okay? Just to clarify, but I'll hear yours first.
Okay, and just before we go to Councillor Sadi, I just wanted to make one comment about the development charges, and you mentioned the $38,000. So we, as the town of Innisfil, do not have control over that entire amount. Some of that is education, and some of that goes to the County of Simcoe. So the amount that we would have to give to those two organizations is about $6,900, and then the balance is at the discretion of this group. Were we to consider anything more, it would actually be deficit for us that we'd have to pay other groups. So having said that, I'll pass it on to Councillor Sadi.
Thank you, excuse me, Your Worship. Just one clarification before I do my recommendation to Lockie Davis, if I can. The new Bill 108 provisions that become effective January 1st, 2020, proposed that Legions will be classified as institutional, meaning that development charges would be payable over 6 years from date of occupancy. So they're not forgivable, it's just that you're deferring the payments on the development charges as an option should a municipality choose that.
Your Worship and members of council, that's correct. The Development Charges Act is what governs the municipalities, but our own bylaws can exempt, and we don't have any exemptions currently. So if we just follow, and generally we've been following, I think most municipalities do follow the Development Charges Act, then starting in 2020, the payment would be over, equal payments over six years.
And just following up on that, that would not include deferral of the portion of development charges that would be payable to the county or the Board of Education.
Your Worship, members, that's correct. So we're just a collection agency, if you will, for those other entities that whatever we collect and we're required to do it, we pay that monthly over to them.
Thank you. So I have a recommendation, and my recommendation is on the screen here, and I'll explain this to council because there's going to be a second recommendation that's going to have to follow for the community fund afterwards. But basically, in the report that we have from the community fund, it states that the OLG funds of the Community Investment Inspiring Innisfil Fund for 2019 would be allocated to the Rizzardo Health Center for 2019. And I can think of no better way of inspiring Innisfil than to take $31,432.55, the full 100% of the development charges to the town, from the allocation of those funds from the 2019 OLG Inspiring Innisfil grant. The balance would then continue. I'll explain when we get in the community fund portion. But this way, it's not coming basically from taxpayers. This is a one-time opportunity that we have this. And this is our veterans that they fought for our country, they fought for each of us here. And I feel that there is no better way of inspiring Innisfil than taking that fund. And that would allow us to, I know other municipalities sometimes do a 50% exemption, but I think that we have this OLG money, and this is a unique opportunity that we have before us. I do have a seconder for my motion, and that is Kevin Ices.
Thank you. Did the seconder want to speak?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure I could say a whole lot more than Councillor Sadi has, and I would just echo. I think this is a great thing for the town to do, and just to encourage the Legion and all they do for our community, and thank them for the service that they've given us. And I second that motion wholeheartedly.
Any other questions or comments on the revised recommendation? Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Considering what our vets have done for us, I think we have to do this for them. So I am totally in agreement with that.
Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in concurrence with the council in their position so far. In the soft services, that if I'm understanding correctly, in 2021 under the CBC that Lockie sent us, okay, I'm just going to read this. The new community benefit contribution requirements under the Planning Act that come in effect the earlier of the passage of the new CBC bylaw of January 1st, 2021, which will replace most of existing categories of soft services. So if the soft services are the education in the county, cannot you, Your Worship, and I approach the county and have those soft services? I know the school board's different.
So the new Bill 108, soft services means things like libraries, parks.
Yes.
We
can't, but it says in 2021 we can eliminate that.
So if the county, if the Legion wanted to go and delegate in front of the county, it would be up to county council to make that decision, not us.
Okay, I just want to make sure that they're aware of that, then they could possibly get that amount reduced as well somewhat. So it's just, okay, thank you.
Councillor Nicol? Thank you, Mr. Davis, and then I had a question for you.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So the $31,432 that you see before you includes our current soft services charge. So there would be no funds to forgive further. So back to your point about education and county levy, those will be affected, but they don't collect for soft services currently. So there would be no further forgiveness. Nothing to prevent the Legion from going in front of those boards for sure, or those councils, and asking forgiveness on that portion. But council really doesn't have discretion over waiving those.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. My question is more regarding that the 31,000. So if the Legion came to us and said, you know, we want to expand, and then we told them how much the development charges were going to be, and they decided not to do it, we wouldn't have a revenue stream of $31,400. So I'm unclear why we need to take it from one pot to another. Is it, explain to me how that works.
So, Your Worship of Members of Council, our development charges are based on the amenities that we have to build, the infrastructure. And so to service, obviously, growth, there's going to be more roads. And so when we calculate what the development charges are, the growth pays for that, and they pay for those amenities. If you're waiving those fees, we still have the costs of servicing. So what the Development Charges Act says is that council has discretion, but you have to make the DCs whole. Otherwise, the other DC payers really are absorbing that cost in their rates. And so that's certainly council's discretion to provide what you're doing, but it's not at the detriment of the other DC payers.
Thank you. And I mean, I echo the comments from the other councillors. I mean, you don't need to hear from every one of us how important the Legion and the veterans are to us. But I do look at it more pragmatically than that, which is that I believe very much that development charges, that growth should pay for growth. But I don't see that making a Legion Hall bigger makes more growth. I see when you add a house and you add a family and you add children that you need an extra library book, you need an extra police officer. But in this case, actually, I see when you add people, you need to add recreation spaces and community spaces, but I see this as providing one of those spaces for the community. So I can certainly support this. As the Deputy Mayor pointed out, in the new Bill 108, Legions are pointed out more than once in the new bill, and they're separate from everything else. So it's obviously that's the way this government plans to go in the future as well. So I could support this motion. So if anyone else wants to speak, then we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. Next, I'd like to applaud Park Bridge for giving up their spot in line and allowing the veterans to go first. But now I'm a little bit afraid, because I'm afraid now Park Bridge is going to come up and say that they want all their development charges waived. No, thank you, really do appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, just before we leave, if I could, I would like to thank council, yourself and council, and the staff for all the assistance they've given us, and it has been great to deal with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bridge. Okay. Thank you again for being so patient, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, the public. My name is Robert Voigt. I'm Director of Planning for Parkbridge Lifestyle Communities. I've got a couple of my colleagues here with me today, Sandy Higgins, who is our Vice President of Planning and Development, and Silva Youssef, who is a project coordinator in our team. And so today I'm happy to bring some really exciting and interesting news dealing with some new development that we have in Innisfil. As you are aware, and more for the audience that may not be aware of who we are, we're Canada's largest developer and owner and operator of land lease communities. And in fact, one of the kind of jewels in our portfolio is a wonderful community of Sandy Cove Acres here in Innisfil that is home to close to 2,000 residents that we feel near and dear to. And what I'm going to be presenting this evening relates to some expansion around and connected to that community. What we see here, outlined in red, is the existing Sandy Cove Acres. And those other four highlighted pieces of land are future development that we are in various stages of planning and development right now. So these are new communities or neighborhoods that collectively will create a wonderful district within Innisfil. And so what we wanted to make sure is that as we develop this and come up with the design, we wanted to really make sure that these new communities really spoke to the place of Innisfil, and that they had an identity of their own, as distinct neighborhoods, but collectively they interrelated, and they also connected not only to the spirit of Innisfil, but the history. And in naming a master planned community, that's kind of where much of this starts. As we get deeper into the process, of course, we look at some really fine design details so that it's a wonderful community to live in, easy to walk around, that the homes are meeting the needs of our residents. But we really need to have a vision, and much of that is expressed in the name of something like what we're talking about here in terms of this master planned community. And so we sought a name that would reflect the beautiful vision and fusion of its natural environment and the proud history of its origins. So in the research we've done, we found some interesting historical stories of the past of Innisfil and how it has evolved. So the Houston family set out to the New World to claim a 500-acre land grant, leaving from Ireland. And they arrived in early 1890 in Halifax after an arduous ocean journey. But that essentially was the beginning of their journey that then became more difficult and eventually landed them here in Innisfil. And that kind of historic thread is something that we wanted to make sure that we followed through. And so we dug deeper into that and let that inform a bit about the development of these 4 new communities around Sandy Cove Acres. And so what we know is that, of course, there's a bright future ahead for Innisfil, but it's based on this story of growth and change from when those first settlers came here and found a new place that they would make home. And so we wanted to make sure that we were setting up the next chapter of that growth and being sort of respectful of that historic precedent that came before us. And so what we've identified is that this entire district and all these communities, they will come under sort of the banner of Point Endeavor, which was the original name for the area here. And so we wanted to see that with this, we were reflecting that context, that sense of place that we could build upon in terms of the physical environment we're going to create with these communities. And the real challenge here is that we want to make sure that the heart and soul of Sandy Cove Acres is not only maintained but enhanced, and that these new neighborhoods and communities that we're creating around that can also learn from the wonderful success that we have in Sandy Cove Acres, the wonderful sense of community and the community cohesion, and the fact that the amount of participation within the residents there, and that we could take that to the next level with these new communities. So while we'll be starting off with a very similar kind of demographic, if you will, with some of this, we're really excited about that offering in the near future in these developments, an offering for first-time home buyers. We've been working with your staff and having a better understanding of how the community is evolving, and that you're trying to attract more and more entrepreneurs into the community. It seems that every other month we're reading online some sort of innovation that Innisfil is bringing into the fold of the way you run and manage your community and the offerings to your residents. And we want to make sure that with our residential component that we can kind of amplify that as well. So this will be a mix of seniors and eventually young families and that coming into the Point Endeavor communities. And as part of that, we will have, in the end, 5 distinct neighborhoods. And it will be comprised of these, having each of them have an individual identity and clear sense of place, but finding the right mix and integration so that the residents of Sandy Cove Acres are surrounded by new friends, new neighbors, and overall as a district it evolves into something that really sings and functions well as a whole within Innisfil. So essentially, we're going back to the early days of Innisfil. Point Endeavor was the original name. It's simple, it's authentic, and it really mirrors the spirit of adventure and aspirations of the founders, and where we would like to participate in the future evolution of your wonderful community. We're proud of our residents, our shared equity partnership with the residents of Sandy Cove Acres, and expanding on that in the best possible way. And with that, I thank you again for the time this evening, and my team and I are more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Voigt. Appreciate that. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Van Berkel.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Is there some commercial in these developments as well, or is it all residential?
Through your worship, Councillor, there are a number of different land uses identified in there, so there are commercial components, even within the existing community, as you know. We're working with your staff, particular economic development, to understand what their vision and perception of what that might be in the future, trying to coordinate that. There's also institutional. That specifically is more looking at the potential of assisted living facilities, right? So for another form of residential for seniors. So it really is an interesting mix that is evolving there. And again, that's why we want to make sure that we don't look at these as separate neighborhoods. We really need to see how these are cohesive and build upon each other.
So what I gather is that it's more for seniors than what you're building?
At this stage, yes. So our model, our company's been around for 21 years now. We have amazing success with providing wonderful seniors housing options in communities across Canada. And that is essentially where much of our expertise lies. But again, we need to recognize the evolution of your community, and there is a strong need for first-time homebuyers being able to get into the market. Land lease is an amazing market-driven solution to providing a different form of attainable housing. And we can bring that into your community that can really support many of the challenges you'd be having with residential. So that's something that would be, if I can use the word loosely, future phases. But that is the way we're looking at the long-term or at least mid-term design of these.
Thank you.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I noticed that in the first map that you had, there was quite a bit of green space closer to the lake, and I'd like to know, what are your plans for those areas? Are they under plow, or are they going to be maintained and made into public accessible walking spaces?
Through your worship, Councillor, that's a great question. So what we're seeing here is essentially an outline over an existing air photo. So nothing that is there is proposed. But I can say that not only do we have the standard requirements of identifying all the protected areas in terms of environmental protections, and you're more than familiar with what a typical development needs to go through. Mm-hmm. Because of the way we design our communities and the way we execute in terms of it being land lease and site plans, and without getting into the weeds on that, it allows us a lot more freedom to position the homes accordingly and have a better respect for those natural environments and the interplay as well. So what we've seen so far on these preliminary designs we're working on are significant areas of green space that are being protected. Many areas are in fact being enhanced, and there will be trail systems identified, and as much as possible making sure that interconnected with public trails as well. We don't do quote, gated communities, right? So we're part of the community. And we also provide various levels of amenities and facilities for our residents on top of that. So the short answer is, yes, we will be doing our utmost, and we have plenty of evidence that from other projects that we could show you on how we're able to execute that way. And we're looking forward to these designs evolving.
Thank you. And just one follow-up. Because the neighborhood is going to be, in some areas you've said it will be mixed in terms of first-time home buyers, has a different wrinkle in terms of what's required for that community. So when regular developments go in, we look at schools and all that kind of stuff, which for an expansion of the existing community wouldn't be required. If you're extending into that area, does that complicate things in terms of having lands available for future schools, or would that be just relying on the existing school system that's there?
Through your worship to the councillor, so we're working very closely with your planning staff and that to make sure that we're in line with all your long-term plans, and of course then the comments that we might be receiving from the school board and that. So as that evolves, that will become something that we need to address more. In our preliminary urban design that we're doing now with this master planning exercise, we want to make sure that that we really use, tried and true ways of creating great places, a great, sense of place and identity for that, which also allows us to have inherent flexibility. So, park spaces, once defined, can be programmed differently. They can have different amenities put in depending on where the market demand is, and we're very keenly aware of that and want to make sure that we don't kind of design ourselves into a box and aren't able to address those kinds of concerns. So this really is about working closely with your staff and making sure we get it right.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanting to know, your other location in Sandy Cove, like there's the north and the south side, they're mostly senior residents. So you're thinking of changing this one to more family-oriented or sections for seniors? That's one question. And the other question is, will they have their own gathering, the community gathering place? Like on the what we have now, there's the hub, the spoke, and the wheel. So will they have their own place to gather?
Yeah, through your worship. So if I got the first question, the existing Sandy Cove community will stay as is. There are certain capital expenditure improvements that we need to make that are just, even if we weren't doing these other projects, and that's always underway as part of our management of these communities. The current plans that we're moving forward and the construction that's underway right now is primarily focused at seniors. We're just preparing that, given the growth of Innisfil, the pressures that we see with people commuting here, you've got obviously the transit extensions and that. We can't be blind to the fact that there are first-time home buyers that are going to be looking for something. So we want to make sure that they're kind of properly brought into the fold. And that means the relationship between different age cohorts and lifestyle choices. There's ways that they connect, there's ways that they need to be buffered, and we just need to get that balance right. So that, I believe, was the first question. The second was in terms of gathering spaces, and I will say I just recently had the chance to be part of a large public meeting at one of those in Sandy Cove Acres. It was wonderful to see. I counted 187 participants came out. That is some phenomenal engagement from residents. Having spent 17 years on your staff side of the table in various municipalities, it's very rare that you get that kind of interest. So we're really quite proud that our residents feel so connected to that. And we want to learn from them, and we want to figure out how we can recreate that in new communities as well. And we've learned from all the other communities that we have across Canada, but this is the one that's closest to this, and we should learn and figure out how we can adapt that. So short answer is yes, they will have their own facilities. What they look like and what they're going to be, we still have to work out those details. But there is a treasure trove of information in the residents that are at Sandy Cove right now.
Okay, just to follow, thank you. I do live in Sandy Cove, and we quite enjoy it. And we use the wheel quite a lot because it's the largest place. And I have to say, we're packed every dance that we have. So I'm not sure what the population is going to be on that side, but just a warning that they really like to be entertained. So you may have to do a little bigger building. So I just wanted to check on that, because it would be difficult to combine everyone into to the halls that we have right now.
Yeah, through your worship, yeah, to clarify again, there is no intent to keep or to ask of the current facilities to carry the burden of all the new residents within there. That is not what we're looking to do. We will, as we add residents, we will add amenities and gathering spaces for them. We want to create opportunity for community, real community, to thrive with people getting together and enjoying the choice of living in these neighborhoods.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to more conversations with you.
As do I.
Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, the first project that I understand we're doing the infrastructure at the moment is for the West Holland. Is that correct?
So we're working on, as you've probably seen, that we've got different phases in the different projects, but yeah, that's...
So West Holland is presently you getting the infrastructure put into place. That's why Lockhart is closed. So in your comments, you said that it's going to be the seniors are a priority in this complex, and is it also first-time buyers?
Through your worship, yes, it is. Seniors is the priority right now. Again, we need to see how, if the market demand, essentially if people come to want to purchase and they're first-time home buyers, we need to be prepared for that. So there's certain design considerations. It is a challenge that we've got to figure out. There is some technical aspects to that currently limit the ability for first-time home buyers to come in easily. That's something we can discuss at another day. It gets kind of deep in terms of the technical aspects on that, but it is something we've seen even in the existing Sandy Cove Acres, where folks they're looking for homes because Innisfil is a great place to live, and like many of your other municipal colleagues around the province, you're all struggling with how do we find quality residents for them. So,
continuation. Okay, so if I understand Sandy Cove Acres, I've been in the community about 39 years. It was totally a seniors complex. And if I understand in the regulations, a long time ago, there were not supposed to be students living there, that we as Innisfil had to provide transportation to the schools. That's in the original deal of Sandy Cove. It's been brought to my attention there are families living there now with kids who are going out to the 11th line to catch a school bus. Now, that is not supposed to be happening. So first-time buyers are buying in Sandy Cove. They do have kids, which was against the policy. I'm sure Donna, Councillor Orsatti will understand where I'm going here. So you've got first-time buyers already. So when is the municipality or the school board going to get hit up for providing bus service that goes into Sandy Cove, because it's quite deep? And I'm living on Big Bay Point, which is very narrow. The bus doesn't just go down Big Bay Point Road. Now it has to go in and up every street. So there's a huge cost there coming. And just to follow up, I have two more questions. Is the total population build out, when you're looking at this area of, you've got Riverlands, Innis, Far Shore, West Holland, what is your total build out population that you're proposing for that area?
Through your worship, so first question. I can't directly speak to if or how many families may or may not be living in Sandy Cove. I just do not have that information. I can confidently say that that is not something that is encouraged. There may be instances with various familial situations where younger members of the family have joined. I'm just suggesting that may be the case. We could find out more on that, on the details for you, but by no means, and I'm quite confident of that, is there any real measurable percentage of sort of a gentrification of that happening with younger families. I'm more than happy to stand confidently on that. The second, so then it comes to the question of busing, if there are sort of future, pick any of the other four new neighborhoods if it does shift to be one of the ones that would at that time be family oriented. As with any development proposals, we need to meet all your targets in terms of population, all your servicing. We're, as I'm sure you're aware of, we've been looking at how we can make sure that we're securing the right amount of allocations for services to these areas. That's all already for many years now in discussion and moving forward. So there, if I can assume that part of the question was that you as a municipality don't want to get caught having approved a certain kind of resident mix that has certain needs and then discover it is something different. We're working very closely with your staff to make sure that it is serviceable for all those needs, kind of regardless of which choice is made at that time. And again, this is not something that will be built out in the next year or two. We're talking here something that really is a couple decades long project. So there's plenty of opportunity to get that right. Again, particularly those services, that can be a real challenge.
Quick follow-up?
Quick follow-up. I'll keep it short. Okay, so I think our concern here, we're going to see a build out of the current West Hollywood. There's going to be first-time buyers there, so we know there's going to be kids. You're not sure if there's kids living in Sandy Cove now that are using our transportation system and bus system. That wasn't in the original deal with Sandy Cove, so I think I was suggesting to staff to look at that very closely and make sure the original guidelines from Sandy Cove are being adhered to. And I'll turn it over to Donna Rosati.
Councillor Asadi.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Quite familiar with Sandy Cove Acres. I was employed there for 20 years and involved with the Rice Robertson family in the development plans for Innis Village, so I'm quite familiar with that. So a couple things that I just want to confirm, that all of these districts are connected to municipal services, both in sewer and water, unlike, because all of them are connected to town services.
Through your worship, yes.
Okay. And then servicing. I know in many of your communities, you handle your own snow removal and that. Will, in these communities, will it be managed by Parkbridge or will it be part of a Town of Innisfil roads crews for winter snow removal? Do you have an answer for that at this time?
Through your worship, so there are certain roads within this that would be public roads, right? And others that might be our kind of typical private road system. Public roads would be maintained by the municipality, and then anything else would be our responsibility as is typical. At this stage, because we're not nearly that deep into the design, can I tell you what the block and street layout is? But okay. There's nothing unique in terms of a major shift from what our standard approach is to providing a great land lease community that allows folks a more attainable home ownership opportunity with us managing the public commons of that, as well as providing recreation facilities of various nature there.
Okay, and then, your mayor, I'm just allowing the questions one at a time, thank you. And just to help the deputy mayor from a technical perspective, and I don't believe that it's changed, you can advertise a community, and I know the Rices and Robertsons had a lot of struggled with this. You can promote it as a retirement, as a seniors community, but you cannot legally prevent a family from moving in. You can try your best and you ask them to be respectful, but it's been a challenge. And I think that then goes, so, families moving in, they would be in the courts all the time trying to do that. Any seniors community from a management perspective continues to try to promote that because it makes a better neighborhood. But there's always those difficult situations where your kids split with their family and they move in, and guess what? You got not only your kids but your grandchildren too. They say they're going to stay a month, and a year later they're still there, and you want them gone as much as the management. Yeah, that's it. Sell your house and move. It's very good for first-time home buyers. It's certainly, every opportunity for attainable homes. I know in Sandy Cove, and I know in your other communities, Parkbridge uses above guideline increases, Aggie, as you refer to, for above charges that get charged back to homeowners. Do you foresee that happening in newer communities, or is that just typically in the older ones where you have to do upgrades?
So this does sort of get into the weeds a little bit. So there are, again, with our portfolio, we have just over 100 communities, 75 residential, the rest are resort recreation. In some instances, we're covered by rent control. Other times, we're not. That also changes every now and then. So the short answer is, again, because we don't quite know what these are, those tools that we have to be able to properly provide good maintenance of the infrastructure as is necessary. And to give you a bit of a scale of an understanding of that, our capital expenditures across our portfolio, so just for the hard infrastructure, is in the order of $30 to $35 million a year for the foreseeable future, and that is an ongoing commitment we have. And so that's one part of it. So the way some of those fees come into play really depends on the makeup of the community, but we will be using the tools that we have available to us to strike that best value proposition for the services we're offering, maintaining a great community, and making sure that it is that shared equity partnership with the residents. They keep their homes because there's pride in home ownership, and we take pride in the community component of it. So it's a kind of a roundabout way to say, yes, it depends.
Thank you. Just one last. And I think just with that, any type of attainable homes that people can afford to purchase is needed in any community. I just think as a, that hopefully in the bill of sales that, those charges are explained that they could be possible, because it prevents afterwards residents then contacting their counselors that they're upset about this and, those types. So I just think when it's clearly spelled out in your bill of sale and your monthly fees, then it clears everything up in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to take a step back here and just, because I think that we might be giving people the impression that this is all, done, everything's signed, draft plan approved. So I just wonder if, and I don't even know if it's appropriate, Mr. Vout, if we could ask staff to get back to us with each parcel and where they are in the planning process, because I'm some of these we've not had a public meeting on, if any of them. And so if you could just quickly say, okay, where each one was in the planning process. You did mention, it's a couple of decades, but as far as, people who might be either watching or listening and thinking, well, how come we haven't had a public planning meeting about this yet and this is being presented? So if you could just address that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So again, just the standard process, if it runs smooth as glass with any development, takes many, many years. In fact, we heard from a presentation from CMHC at AMO not a few weeks ago, where they were saying that on average across the province, from time of purchase of land till homes are constructed across the province, is a 15-year process, right? And that's kind of typical, right? So what we have with our projects here, they are in various levels of design. If you're comfortable with this, Your Worship, we'd like to maybe put together a package so that not only is it not just my voice disappearing into the ether, we can give it to staff, you can post it, and we can kind of show you where we're at. I'd be more comfortable with that because it'll be more clear and people can point to the thing that says that as opposed to memory. Because again, we want to make sure that we're having the right kind of public engagement.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I am sorry, Mr. Stephen. Sorry, your last name. Montgomery. Mr. Montgomery. I didn't see you there. I just looked at the chair for Mr. Kane. He wasn't there, so I didn't see there was anybody from planning here or would have addressed that. Do you have like where each of these is in the process, or if you could just quickly share?
Sure. To your worship, I can clarify the one in yellow, which is called Innis, that went through public meeting process and was approved by the Ontario Municipal Board in 2012. But the other ones, the one in green called Riverlands, Fair Shore in purple, and the West Holland have not been through Planning Act application public meeting processes at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Van Burk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering whether or not whether you will or you will not have a public meeting with the residents at Sandy Coves, so they know what's going on and they don't keep calling.
Through your worship, yes, we've already had one,
Yeah.
and we plan on having many more. I will say on a personal note, I was quite excited about the interest. I was invited to a barbecue from the horticultural group that's there that runs, amazing community garden. That's one of the kinds of amenities we might be providing in some of these new neighborhoods, and we really got quickly into the discussion about the quality of the soil and everything. There's so much knowledge there that we really want to tap into. So that was the first of many meetings, and then of course we're going to open the floor, if I can use that phrase, to the broader public beyond just what's required in terms of the Planning Act, statutorily required meetings. We tend to always do more than that. We see value in it.
Thank you. I think that's very important to keep them informed because they're retired people. They have a lot of time on their hands. They want to know what's going on. So, thank you.
Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of quick comments from staff's perspective. Working with Parkridge over the last several months in particular, I just wanted to extend our appreciation. There's no doubt that Parkridge has a very long-term view of their developments in Innisfil and across the country. And it's reflected in their planning and their professionalism. And it's quite unusual. Developers often have a time horizon that sort of ends when final assumption of the roads happen. But this developer is very interested in the very long-term success of their communities, and it's very much reflected in the work that we're doing with them. So I wanted to appreciate Sandy and his team for doing that. The other point I just wanted to underline, and I know Council's very aware of it, but the notion of attainable housing is a critical piece for our entire province and the country to be worried about. And I think the notion that private money is going into creating attainable housing is wonderful for our community. It's not unlike the Tollendale concept that every government dollar that doesn't have to go into that kind of housing can be used for other purposes. And so I think it's a great opportunity for the community, and we welcome, and I think Council does as well, the attainable housing piece. And on a totally unrelated note, Rizzardo donations are still being accepted in the community. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. That was really smooth. So I just want to thank you very much for your presentation. It was very informative, and I'm going to ask that the delegation regarding Parkbridge Lifestyle Community Basic 101 and land lease and the upcoming developments surrounding Sandy Cove Acres be received as information. And that's moved by Councillor Payne and seconded by Councillor Van Perkel. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thanks again very much for being here. Thank you. So that takes us to the end of the delegations, and the next item on the agenda is if there's any county council, municipal association, or conservation authority committee updates. Deputy Mayor, you're going to give a county council update?
County Council was short and sweet this week. However, our first situation is dealing with waste, with the recycling that's taking place within the town of Innisfil. Basically, the waste companies just cannot get enough people, hire enough people to do the type of job that is required for collecting waste and recyclables. I think when we found it out, there was almost an 80% turnover in a year within the waste companies. So that's a significantly high turnover. They may hire 10 people. They test them out for a few weeks. 4 might say, oh, I can't do the job, it's too hard. Another 4 will say, I'll try it for a few weeks, but no, I don't like it. So they're quitting. So out of 10 recipients, they might get 2 that actually take the job. So their pay scale is around $21 an hour plus benefits. It is posted. I tried to move it over to my other page. You can fill out an application if you know anybody that wants the job because they are hiring. But until that situation is rectified, the county is looking possibly at all kinds of alternatives for the end of the contract at 2022 or 2020, when the province also steps in and they're taking over the blue box scenario. So there may be some changes that take place with the waste in Innisfil. So please don't be patient, and please don't yell at the drivers and curse at them and complain about your waste being put out there. Just a little discretion would be much appreciated by the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any updates? Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had our first Remembrance Day Committee this past week, which was established this week, actually. The focus was in Cookstown Cenotaph, which needs a lot of work. We set the agenda for the next couple of months, and we have another meeting coming within the next 3 weeks. So that's basically the update.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Councillor Asadi?
Just a quick update on, I know the report's in here, but for those that are online or the rest of council, just a couple details on tonight's agenda. You'll see that in the report, I had made 2 recommendations to ban barbecues and tents until the park master plan was updated. That did not pass with the committee. I couldn't get any interest in backing me up, so I respect the wishes of the committee, but I did have to try. I promised the residents in my ward that I would do that, and also that the committee is preparing their the committee is also, they've made a lot of improvements, although they are incremental, and some people, it's not fast enough, but we are preparing our closing report for council, and members are getting that to clerk services for the next update.
Thank you. Anyone else? I just had one that I want to highlight, and that is economic development at the County of Simcoe, that they have successfully acquired 90% of the Lake Simcoe Airport, which is significantly more than they had in the past. It was the City of Barrie that had 60%, Oro-Medonte had 20%, and the county had 20%, and now Barrie holds 10% share and the county 90%. So lots of opportunity for economic development in that area, and stay tuned. So moving on to our consent list, we have slightly changed the agenda format. Just you'll see it as we go through, but I think you'll find, I've found it easier to read because the correspondence pages are now searchable right on the one page. So we'll go through this list. For those of you who are not regulars here, we go through each item, and council has the opportunity to pull any item they wish to speak further on. If an item doesn't get pulled, you can assume that that item will pass as with the staff recommendation that is printed on the agenda. So we'll start with adoption of the minutes and A1, the regular council meeting of August the 14th. Oh, sorry, I have to, do I have to go into committee of the whole first? No? Oh, once we pull them, we do. Okay, thank you. It's been a while. See, you let me off for summer break and one meeting in August, and I forgot what I'm doing. Okay, so minutes from August 14. Thank you. The Innisfil Beach Ad Hoc Park Committee, I think was the one that Councillor Sadi was just speaking to. Just one reminder on that item, and that is we are looking for some new recruits on that committee. If anybody has any interest, please feel free to apply. Item B2, the Innisfil Accessibility Advisory Committee. The next is the Heritage Committee meeting of August the 15th. Next is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I didn't want to pull that, Your Worship. I just wanted to commend the committee for addressing vacant and heritage properties and the deterioration and neglect, because I think that's something that's important, especially with some of the buildings that we see that they, you know, their heritage, they start falling apart, and we do need to protect that. So I'm glad to see that in the report, and I'm working on that. If you could pass on that to the committee. Thank you. Councillor Payne.
Thank you. Next is the School Zone Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. Seeing none. Staff reports for action. We have the first one, which is the Community Foundation Fund update, which was deferred from August the 14th. Councillor Sadi.
Referred to committee.
Next is the traffic calming strategy update, which again was deferred since August the 14th. And just for those who might be interested, sometimes the reason we defer these is if we think that there might be a lot of community curiosity or questions, we defer them just to give lots of time for members of the public to ask questions and make delegations and provide comments. So, seeing none. C3 is the rover pilot update, request to extend the letter of agreement. Thank you. C4, the Carson Creek improvement, appointment of an engineer. I want to, I think I'm going to pull that. Not because I want to change the, but I just want to have a conversation. Next is C5, which is the bylaw, part lot control bylaw exemption for Alcona Downs. Next are the staff reports for information. The first one, the Guilford Road Memorandum of Award. I wondered if I could just ask Ms. Jenkins if there's a timeline on that project.
Through your worship, I'm not sure of exact dates, but I know that they're actively out there constructing already and will be completed this year.
Thank you very much. Next is the submission on joint and several liability. I'm going to pull that one. E1, bylaw to appoint co-op students as municipal bylaw enforcement officers. F is correspondence for action, there's none. And then G is the correspondence for information. There's 3 proclamations. One we raised the flag for this evening. And finally, 8.1, which is the consent list recommendations. So mover and a seconder to move those items. Councillor Fowler, Deputy Mayor Davidson, all those in favor? That's carried. And next is resolved to committee of the whole. A mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Waters, Councillor Van Berkel, all those in favor? and that's carried. So now we're in committee of the whole, and we'll deal with the items that were pulled. And the first one was pulled by Councillor Arsati, and it's the Community Foundation Fund update.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was a few items in this in reading the report, and one of them, was I had spoken to the board members and was happy to receive that the clarifications on the framework model that you're using for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is focused on local Innisfil causes to support. Is that correct, Ms. Ray? Thank you.
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And then in this, in the report, the $50,000 that is the proposed breakdown for the OLG fund breakdown is that $50,000 will continue to be granted to community groups through a modified Inspiring Innisfil Grants program, and that will be decided by the board in the fund?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct as well.
Okay, thank you. And then there was just one, I've made a recommendation based on the recommendation I had for the Legion for the Veterans, where I've taken money out of this report, so I have to explain some of it. In the report for council in the back end, just above the conclusion, there was a recommendation from staff that with the absence of the Inspiring Innisfil Grant Program in 2019, that staff directed that the OLG funds that would typically be allocated to Inspiring Innisfil Grant Program, as well as the proceeds from this year's Mayor's Golf Tournament, would be allocated to support the Rosardo Health and Wellness Center. So that will be excluded from the fund. So we only have this 1 year to have that change in that option. And that is why I chose to make the recommendation, and thank you to the rest of council for all approving that recommendation that I made, that what we did was, out of the $50,000 that was in this Inspiring Innisfil Grant Program, that we have now reduced it, we've removed the $31,432.55 from it, and the balance is $18,567.45, which will be used with the proceeds from the Mayor's Golf Tournament. So in order to do that, I had to make a revised recommendation from the fund report, and I don't know whether any other councillors had any other questions on this fund before I went to the revised recommendation.
If you could just provide a seconder, councillor.
My seconder is Councillor Ken Fowler.
Then just go ahead and continue.
Thank you. So from the recommendations that are in the report, what I've done is that item number 2 is allocating, the change is excluding, oh, that was the other thing, was that I felt that it was important that council still have the $20,000 annual discretionary funds. We may not use it, but there's times when something comes to council that we need to have that discretionary money available to us. If we don't use it, it can go back or held. But I really felt that that should be there. And in this report, it was that, you know, that that was going to be removed or taken from another, sorry, I haven't got all my notes here. Taken from another, I'll find it. Okay, hang on. So I have a number 2 that we exclude that the 20,000 discretionary funds be given to the foundation, that should still remain as an option for council, and that in item number 3, that this explains the balance remaining out of the Inspiring Innisfil Grant Fund, since we just all agreed to support the veterans, and that the mayor's money will be all allocated for this year only to support the Rosardo Health and Wellness Center. The other options are as recommended in this report.
Thank you. Questions or comments on the revised recommendation? I'm going to ask the clerk's office, we've had this deferred for a month. Did we have any members of the community bring forward any comments or questions that we would have received them if we did? So, you know, generally what happens in my experience is that when people are unhappy about something, you hear about it. When people are happy about something, you don't hear about it. So I'm going to take that lack of hearing thing as very good news and acceptance from the community that this is a direction that we do want to move in. We also did receive a letter of support tonight from the Innisfil Christmas for Kids. We also received a delegation and open forum regarding that. My question would be to Mr. Davis regarding item 2 of the revised recommendation. I would concur with the councillor that staff does, or council does need a little bit of wiggle room on items for council's discretion. And Mr. Lockie was kind enough to pull me up the last 2 years of what we've used that discretionary money for. And we usually, we tend to use around 14 or 15,000 of the 20,000. And in most cases, it's for waiving fees. And I'll use it for an example, the Innisfil Garden Club, which has their meetings at the Churchill Community Center. So the council discretionary fund is moved from there to pay for the rent. So there's no, actually, we don't give out most of that money. Most of it is transferred, and it's a matter of waiving fees. For instance, if for Ice Corp or for the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast or any of those items where there's a permit fee, then it's paid for out of that fund. But my question would be to Mr. Davis, what are the options for the $20,000? Is it through OLG, through, what would your suggestion be if council decided that they needed that amount or something in order to be able to grant requests for things like waiving fees for a skating rink for the night for a community event?
Your Worship, members of council, so similar to what you approved for the Legion, the $20,000 as you've described has really been used to make the departments whole. So if we're waiving fees, it's in their budgets. And so I think, you know, in my time here, I think councils previously were maybe handing out a lot of free, but it's technically not free because it's costing us in some manner, right? So one of the options would be, if this motion fails, then would be to direct staff to program $20,000 into the budget, so we would tax the taxpayer for those costs. It still would be an internal, really making us whole, right? Because we have the departments, I'm looking at Mr. Inwood, you know, a lot of them where we've got those revenues already programmed. If we don't get those revenues, then technically we would have a deficit. Luckily, we haven't been running deficits here in the years that I've been here. So the other option is just don't worry about it. Still waive the fees and just have staff manage those fees. But I think the other thing about the 20,000 was kind of to make council aware of the quantum of what was being given out. So that was more of just an awareness aspect as opposed to a real funding aspect. So there's those options. We could always take a look again that we just allow council up to whatever limit. We could still track it and just manage it within our existing budgets without adding a line item. And as again, we've been managing to have surpluses the last few years, so we would just manage within that. So there's a variety of options council could consider besides this motion.
Thank you. And I think it's fair that if council, I think it's only fair to do, I know it must seem like some people just as creating more work and a bit of a shell game, but really it's only fair. So if council in its generosity decides to, waive a fee that Mr. Inwood is counting on his revenue, and then he comes before us at the end of the year and says, I didn't meet my revenue, and we have short memories, and we say, well, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you get your revenue? And, he'd be too polite to say, because you gave it all away. So I get why you want to do that. It makes good sense from an accounting perspective. So I'm happy to, I'm happy to see that continue happening. Any other questions or comments on the fund? Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Worship Members of Council. I just wanted to clarify that the report indicated that staff would investigate ways to transfer the council discretionary fund as well as the Heritage Committee funding into the operating budget. We weren't recommending canceling the council discretionary fund, but in fact, just finding another revenue source internally through our operating budget for part of the reason that you've just discussed as council. I just wanted to flag for council, though, if you are proceeding to remove $20,000 a year from the transfer to the foundation had proposed, or the board had proposed, the breakdown of the $200,000 in the report. Absent council direction, presumably the board will make a decision about where that $20,000 shortfall will be made up. And so I just don't want there to be any confusion moving forward that the creation of the foundation has been based on and proposed $200,000 transfer. So I just wanted to be clear moving forward that there's not a specific expectation from council about how that's addressed. Thank you, Worship.
Councillor Sadi?
My thoughts were that this is the money from OLG, the 20,000, and not trying to withdraw more from the fund. But I'd hate to think that even though we're sliding some money around, that we're going to take it from taxpayers in the discretionary fund. So if there's another way, unless I'm misunderstanding something. I know it goes in one pocket and out the other. We get the money from OLG. This is, we looked at the $200,000, the breakdown from the grant in the previous model, and it's being shuffled. So yes, the 20,000 will come out of that. But if you're saying that this is, just clarifying, is if the 20,000 is going to come out of the budget, is that coming out of taxpayers' money or ratepayers?
Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Worship. I think the way that our revenues work is that they all come in to the town through different sources, including OLG, development charges, and then there are expenses that are associated and tracked back to different revenue sources. So I don't see the distinction personally. I understand what you're saying from an optics perspective, but my concern is not about whether you choose to use the OLG revenues. My concern is that there was specific funding allocation set up and proposed by the board, $100,000 for a distribution through grant funding, larger multi-year trust philanthropy-based funding, $50,000 for the continuation of what is today the Inspiring Innisfil Fund, and then $50,000 for the costs associated with administering the foundation and setting it up and everything else. So if what now council is saying is that there's going to be $20,000 less a year, the board will be faced with the decision of where the $20,000 comes out of. And so I don't want there to be any confusion later if the board decides to take the $20,000. Presumably they'll just distribute it as best they can, but the costs are real, so it will have to come out of the grant funding. So you're choosing, instead of to give the funding out through the grant programming, you're choosing to make council make the decision about where that money goes. And that's totally your prerogative. I just don't want there to be confusion later about what the board has decided to do with the direction from council. It's certainly open to council to decide where that $20,000 ought to come out of. This is real-time drafting. Thank you, Your Worship.
And can I just add that, you know, we're talking about $20,000 and $100,000 going to the, or $200,000 going to the foundation. We get about $5 million a year in OLG funds. So, you know, my preference would be to allow the foundation the $200,000 and get and ask for $20,000 from the OLG funds to go into the discretionary fund when we do the budget discussion, which is coming up very shortly for 2020. I just want to say that I think that we probably don't realize it now, but how I've often said that the people who decided to start Innisfil Beach Park, whatever year that was, I know sometimes we don't think of it as a gift, but it is a gift. And we have to thank those councils of the future for creating that. I think the councils of the future of Innisfil will thank us dearly for creating this fund and for dealing with some of the social issues that we try not to see sometimes because it makes us uncomfortable. I would like to see us give them the amount of money that's suggested in the report, which is the $200,000, and then direct staff to somehow find this council a maximum of and it doesn't mean we have to spend it all, but a maximum of $20,000 so that when the small community groups come to us and they need a little help and it doesn't fit in with the aspirations of the foundation, we still have the opportunity to make those, to help in that smaller way. Councillor Waters and Councillor Asadi.
I support that idea. It's always, I find it interesting that if somebody's asking me to donate money, I have some skin in the game when I donate my money. But if I'm donating somebody else's money, who cares? So that's kind of the OLG thing. We're donating somebody else's money. Yeah, sure, go ahead. But if it's my money, I have some skin in the game, and I would see us come from our revenues as opposed to asking OLG to pay for our donations. Thank you.
Councillor Asadi.
And I agree. The only thing I was conscious of was not impacting our ratepayers. So if it can come out of the other fund of the OLG stream that comes in, then I'm fine removing it from here. So we would then just take out the bolded, excluding the 20,000 discretionary funds. That would be removed from item number 2 then. Because do we need to say in this report that we're going to get the discretionary funds in this recommendation?
Mr. Rayner?
Through you, Your Worship, members of council, the intention that staff have is to bring back as part of the budget report for 2020 that gives you the update and the small tweaks that are proposed to recommend at that time, because I can assure you that the Heritage Committee is also very interested to know what's going on in terms of a proposal. So Mr. Davis and I have made it very clear to staff we're not intending to recommend a tax increase beyond what was approved for 2020, not to let too much out of the bag too early, but you should have the report in November, and so we should be able to manage it within our operating budgets. Thank you.
Councillor Asadi, did you have a friendly, did you want to amend the recommendation?
Yes, so then, excuse me, so it's already been amended. Oh, you're good, Kim. You're good.
All right, and is the seconder agreeable with that?
Seconder, you're agreeable. Thank you. And just if I can just confirm with our CAO and Finance Department, we still have option. We haven't finished the year. If we need to have some access to that discretionary, you will find the funds.
Your Worship, members of council, so your discretionary fund, you still have, I don't know it off the top of my head. I think there's about $5,000 or $6,000 left of the $20,000 allocation for 2019. So we're not touching that with this motion. That is still available this year.
Thank you. So I just want to take a moment to thank Ms. Ray for the work that she has put in to this file. I know it's been a lot of work, a lot of research, and also to the foundation boards, Ms. Rosardo, who's here tonight, but also the other two board members. When we're gifted to have the OLG provide us with the amount of money they do every year, I think giving that small amount to create this pool for our community is the right thing to do. All in favor of the motion? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder for the motion here. This is Deputy Mayor Davidson and Councillor. I need a mover and a seconder. I just wanted to speak to it. I didn't want to change it, if that's okay, Councillor Ices. So I'm glad to see this coming forward, and I think the caution that I have here is the timing for this project, because reading the report, it's very clear that this was in the original report back in whatever year it was, and that this has been ongoing for a long time. But subsequently, we've had some silt issues in the Carson Creek subwatershed, and my concern is that the Drainage Act is hard enough for people to kind of grasp and get their mind around, and why they have to pay their share, and understanding the whole Drainage 101. But the fact that we've had some silt problems, probably some of them due to erosion, I don't know, but I think the requirement for communication and outreach to this group is going to even be more critical, because what I foresee happening is that they're going to say, okay, there was some silt problems in the creek last year, it's all developers' fault and you're making us pay for it. So I just wondered if you had you did mention in the report doing kind of a Drainage Act 101, but I would suggest that in that you make this clear that this project started way years before this last summer, so they don't equate the issues this summer with why they're going to be charged for any work that's happening. Comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm excited that we were fortunate enough to have R.J. Burnside and Associates, the successful proponent in this particular project, given the extensive and great work they've done over the last couple of years on the South Innisfil Creek Drain project as well. We have certainly learned how to communicate better with our landowners who will be affected by the Municipal Drainage Act. So we certainly wanted to do a unique 101, Drainage 101 session, and in that we will endeavor to include an in-depth background so that folks understand timelines in the history of what led up to this, so that they don't perceive it to be because there's been recent issues. So we'll make sure that happens.
Anyone else? All in favor? That's carried. And a mover and a seconder for the submission to the joint and several liability. I pulled that one too, but I just, again, don't want to change it. I just wanted to speak to it just quickly. Deputy Mayor Davidson, Councillor Fowler. So this item is near and dear to my heart, so I just couldn't let it get by without making some comments. This is something that that through the Municipal Association, AMO's been working on for, I'm thinking 15 years or more. So happy to see it get this far. It has a huge impact on the amount of insurance that the town of Innisfil pays. And when I say the town of Innisfil pays the insurance, I'm saying the residents of the town of Innisfil pay the insurance through their property taxes. And it's become, it always has been, but it's getting worse. You saw in the charts the number of claims that we've had come in recently. So the idea behind this is the Minister, the Attorney General has asked us, is looking at amending the legislation and has asked us several questions on items that have happened to us or our experience with joint and several. So the whole purpose around joint and several is the fact that, if there's some kind of, and I'm sure I'm not doing that like a lawyer can, but if there's some kind of an accident in Innisfil, if it's a fellow that's speeding, he has no insurance, he's over the legal limit of alcohol, and he kills somebody or goes into the ditch. If there was snow on the stop sign and we're considered 1% liable out of all that, and he's 99% liable, we could end up paying the entire claim or any claims that are brought forward. It's become an issue with municipalities. It's why municipalities have become so risk adverse. It's why years ago you saw big signs in Orangeville that said no more tobogganing, because municipalities can't afford to let people toboggan. It's why, we now have to think twice about having community events at an ice rink or, all kinds of events. You saw in the list some of the absurd claims that have come in. We had a claim that named us in a suit resulting from, because we didn't let our roadways be free of deer. That somehow the fact that a deer was on the roadway, then we were named in that claim. We had a claim that we were provided notice and it was a trip and fall on private property. So all of these things add up to insurance rates that are going through the roof. And we're told that municipalities can expect a minimum increase between 20 and 25% to their premiums. And we've heard of some places in the county, they've had over 50% premium increase. So I want to thank the Director of Legal Services and your team for doing the work on this file. I know when you've got a pile of work to do and there's this letter from the province that is like, this isn't important, it can go to the bottom of the pile, but I'm really glad we took the time to make this submission. And certainly from my position on AMO, dealing with the Minister of Attorney General, we'll be pushing for some changes so that we can stop seeing all these very rich personal claim injury lawyers making big ads and billboards everywhere. Okay, I'm done my soapbox for the night. Anyone else have any comments on it? Seeing none, all in favor of the recommendation? Thank you. So the RISE recommendation is moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And the consideration of adoption of the motions or the recommendations we just passed. Councillor Van Berkel, Councillor Payne, all those in favor? That's carried. Announcements. Any announcement from members of council? Councillor Van Berkel.
Yes, the Legion is having their annual Italian night on the 21st of September. Tickets are still available. That's one of their big fundraisers. So if anybody's willing to come, please, you can see me or call the Legion and get a ticket. They're $25 a piece, and it's catered by Pass the Plus.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Councillor Orsatti?
Thank you. I just want to say to anybody who's watching the live stream that if you have not put in any of your comments for your vision for Innisfil Beach Park, please do. Go on the website. This is your opportunity to create what you want to see or what you don't want to see. I've spoken to Mr. Galen Pierce. He will extend the questionnaires until I believe it's October 10th. to allow residents to continue on that. But it is important because people will, you know, we need you to get involved, and I can't express enough how important that information is.
Thank you. Anyone else? I just want to say that a number of councillors and myself attended a conference at the AMO conference this year. It was August 18th to the 20th, I believe, and it was great. I hope that you had, those who were going for the first time had a good experience, and I know it's a bit like drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot to learn, but a good experience. And I also wanted to thank Leisure Services and the Library Services for trying to keep the young ones entertained over the summer months with the neighborhood nights and the mobile youth center, the Fresh Air Flicks and the reading programs at the library. All those extras that they put on help make our community what it is. And then finally, the Innisfil Food Bank has gone out and made quite a few pleas for replenishing their cupboards, and if anybody can help the food bank and drop off some supplies, I'm sure that would be greatly appreciated. Councillor Fowler.
Just so you're aware, Pastor Courtney has been reaching out to the public, and apparently our pleas have been heard. The public has responded amazingly. The food is already flowing in, so our people are taking care of our own. Please keep it up.
That's great, but I'm sure he'll take more. Okay, so that's all the announcements, unless anybody's missed anything. So the confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor Van Berkel, seconded by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? It's carried. And I'm sorry, I should have announced earlier that that Councillor Nicol had to leave early. His son wasn't well, so he sent his regrets for the balance of the meeting. And move for adjournment, because that's when I usually go to Councillor Nicol. So I'll go to Councillor Fowler and the Deputy Mayor. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and look forward to our next meeting, which is September the 25th. Have a good evening. Wow.